Welcome back, and we're going to work together on this assignment. Try to create a custom exception handling middleware. So first of all, how do we handle an exception? And we all know in C#, we need to use try catch to handle exception, right? We need to use try catch to include all of the code that is potentially going to throw exceptions. So far, you have learned that middleware pipeline is actually the foundation of SB.NET Core. Everything in SB.NET Core runs through the middleware pipeline, except the Castro server, which means that every single component here. So with this example, we have 4 different middleware components in the pipeline. So potentially any of these middlewares or middleware components could throw an exception. So therefore, if you were to handle this, the easiest way to do it is to use a try catch and just include everything inside your try catch just like this, right? But our requirement for the assignment is to actually use a middleware component instead of just directly using try catch in the program.cs file. It doesn't make too much sense. Since we already have this middleware pipeline pattern here, we need to follow that pattern. We need to create a middleware, right? So therefore, we are going to create a middleware and based on the pipeline pattern. And as I have already pointed out in one of the first video in the section, the middleware pipeline. Let me find the diagram there where we have the middleware pipeline theory here. And you have already seen this diagram where the middleware is actually a series of functions, right? The first middleware calls the second middleware, calls the last middleware, and then everything returns back. Because it's a series of function calls, which means that this first middleware calls the second middleware, and then calls the third one, and then calls the fourth one. And then when the fourth one returns, it's back to the previous one, and then returns back to the previous one, and then to the previous one. So you are very familiar with this already. So therefore, what we can do is we can create another middleware, and we can call it my custom exception handling middleware, or whatever name you want to give it. And where do you need to place it? This is very important. We need to place that middleware at the very beginning of the middleware pipeline. And when we do that, now let's just start writing the code. We're going to call it middleware, use middleware, and then I'm going to call it my custom exception handling middleware, or just call it my custom exception handler. And this middleware will have to be placed at the very beginning. Because when you place this middleware at the very beginning, that means this middleware is itself a function and is the first function that encompasses all of the others, right? The first function calls the second, and second calls the third, and all the way to the last. Which means the try catch in this first function is going to encompass all of the rest of the middleware, the entire pipeline, right? That's the theory. And now let's try to create it. So we have this class name already. Let's go to Solution Explorer and go to our middleware components here. This is where we place our custom middleware components. Let's just simply create a class, and then we're going to call this my custom exception handler, and go over here. Remember, there are 2 steps, or let's say 3 steps. Right? The first one is to let it implement the I middleware, do a control dot, or just simply go to the left hand side, click on this light bulb, and then click on this implement interface. Now we have this one implemented without any actual implementation. And here it's very simple. We're going to use a try catch to include all of the rest of the middleware in it. And how do we do that? We simply just call next and pass the context into it, right? So when we do this, we are calling the next function. And then, of course, the next function is going to call the next one after it, and then all the way to the last middleware, and it all come back. Therefore, by using a try catch like this, you are actually including all of the middleware components in the entire middleware, right? And then here you can just say catch and you're going to catch a generic exception because you don't know what type of exception is going to be thrown. So you're going to use this generic exception like this. And then here you can do your logging, you can do your displaying. Let's just do simple, okay? So of course here the next is going to be possibly a async method. So we're gonna use async, and then over here we're gonna use await, and over here we're gonna use the context dot response dot write, right? And we're gonna write asynchronously with the await keyword like this. But first of all, we need to specify the content type. So we're gonna say context dot response dot content type. The content type is part of the header. You don't have to write it this way. You can write it like this, headers type. But because this is a very commonly used header, therefore there is a separate attribute for it or a separate property for it. We're going to use text/HTML. So we're saying that we're going to write HTML in the response body. Okay, now we're going to write the response body. And what are we going to do? We're going to say, first of all, I'm going to use header or head number 2 to make it pretty big. I'm going to say this is a error, and what type of error is going to be expressed in the next line. Okay, so here I'm going to say the error was a interpolation. I'm going to say ex dot message. I'm going to just put the message right here. So this is top level message. This is not the inner message, right? Okay, so we have this and it shows the message. We can actually try to use it. Although I want to provide more information to the user. But so far, we're already providing something and I want to use this already. In the program.cs file, I want to place it in the pipeline. And as I mentioned, we really need to place it right here. But this is not enough. Remember, we need to register it into the service collection, just like what we did for our custom middleware there. So let's copy and paste it now. Let's copy this class name and put it here. All right. So now we're ready to use this middleware. And we need to throw an exception somewhere because right now we don't have any exceptions in this 4 different middlewares here. So let's try to throw an exception. Let's say we throw it directly. Maybe not directly. Maybe let's throw it a third middleware here. And let's just throw new, let's say application exception. And I'm going to say test or exception for testing. And that's it. And let's run this application now and see what happens. All right, we're looking at this page, right? This is the home page and nothing is happening. It's blank. And let's troubleshoot. Let's go to F12 and we look at this console tab here. We see this fail to load resource and it looks pretty familiar. It looks pretty familiar. This is actually something I really want to show you. We have covered this, that once we start writing responses, the headers already go to the client side. So if we want to change the header, it doesn't work and it's going to cause problems. And that's exactly what's happening right now because we're trying to use our middleware, although we placed it in the first place here. The problem with this is that if we go to the exception handler here, you can see that this catch is happening after the entire pipeline has been called, or at least after the exception is thrown, which means partially some of the components already executed. In our case, that's exactly the scenario. If we go to program.cs, we go over here. So middleware 2 throwing exception right here. That means the first 2 middlewares here already executed. And if we open it, we can see that response.write. So here means that even at line 15 in the first middleware, we already sent headers to the client. And what are we trying to do in our exception handler? We're trying to handle the exception right after this, which means a lot of the response.write have been called. And after that, we're trying to modify the header. So let's go to exception handler here. We're trying to modify the header right here. It doesn't work. We have to fix it. We're going to cut this and we're going to place it right here. And this is going to fix the problem because this is going to be the first line that is executed. And because this is the first middleware in the pipeline, so therefore it's not going to have the same problem anymore. And let's run it again. Let's see to see whether the problem is fixed or not. Okay, now we see our error and we see our top level error message, right? Exception message here. And here, this is written by the first middleware. Because we coded like this, so we wrote it to the response already, which means it's already sent to the client. And the exception is thrown afterwards. So therefore, we cannot undo what we already sent. Remember, the response body is a stream. So it's already went to the client. So therefore, we cannot remove this. Whatever that is already output should be output, right? It's already output. So our error messages start at the bottom and there's nothing we can do about that. So I'm going to say error and then exception handling. So therefore we can see that our exception handler already works, right? It caught the error. No matter where you throw the error, we already caught the error. The rest of the work is to just make it pretty, right? We can change our exception handler here, for example, to add what are the query strings being used? What are the headers being used? Everything can be spelled out in this area. And when developers see this error message page, they are informed with enough information to troubleshoot, right? In this video, I'm not going to write the rest of the HTML. You can try to make this error handling page prettier. And that's everything I want to show you in this video. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, I will see you in the next one.